Today in the studio, a seasoned digital executive who brings his whole self to work and encourages others to do the same. An entrepreneur and investor who puts her money where her mouth is. A digital culture builder in one of the world's top companies who care. And later on, our very own Prince Constantine with a heart for diversity. One and all, leaders and role models proving that being inclusive is also good for business. Welcome to episode 40 of CIO TV. Well, you know what they say, life begins at 40. And today we are talking about how purpose-led businesses succeed just so much better and what it means to include everyone. So let's start with my guests. Welcome, Jeroen Heijmans, VP and Deputy Country Leader at the Netherlands at Salesforce. Yep. Peter Dew, CDO and CMO at DSM.
Hello.
Janneke Niessen, co-founder Capital T. Welcome. So I'm really curious, Peter, what challenges are currently dominating the business agenda at DSM?
Well, I think challenges are the same across the world at the moment. We've had a year like nobody has ever had. We've faced challenges like we've never ever thought we would need to, and certainly in the case of DSM, we've managed to pull through. We've managed to pull through and provide nutrition for the world. Our businesses remain solid. But obviously, as we start to see a way out of the pandemic, the challenge now is how do we see a new way of work, a new organization, a new world that is changed and better as a result of the pandemic, but ready for the challenges that are ahead of us.
Building back better, absolutely.
Building back better, and absolutely.
Janneke, that's also your passion, right? Building the world.
Yes. Yeah, so we are investors at Capital T, me and Eva de Mol, and we invest in software technology companies that solve a real problem with AI, artificial intelligence, in digital health, education, climate tech, future of work, and the new social. So based on the topics that we've chosen, you can already see that we try to make an impact, although we're not an impact fund per se. And I think this last year for us, it has been extremely busy. Because there's a lot of companies that are hit and people that are hurt, of course, but if you look at technology, that has grown. And I think like with any crisis, also new companies emerge because you will see new trends in society that others see opportunities, and that's what we tap into.
Brilliant. So we see the winners and the losers, but we definitely have this digital evolution. Jeroen, what do you see with your customers?
Thank you. Yes, so I'm working for Salesforce. So we provide CRM solutions to our customers for a digital 360 customer view. There's of course a lot of questions from customers because everybody understands that digital acceleration needs to happen. So there's a lot of questions around digital transformation. How do you make it happen? How can you change your business models? How can you speed up on innovation? And that's something that we've seen particularly in the last 5 or 6 months. So initially we also suffered quite a bit from COVID-19, like many of our customers did. So we tried to help them, but now it really feels like everybody is accelerating. So interesting times from that angle.
Yeah, I think everything's just picked up at a clip. And at DSM, Peter, actually you don't have the title CIO at the moment. You've got 2 titles, CDO and CMO at interim. So very interesting, this digital and marketing combination. Do you want to share a bit about that?
Yeah, I think I'll major more on the CDO role. Recently, we've had a really good look at our digital agenda, our digital strategy. And we've realized that creating an end-to-end capability from innovation with digital right the way through to the delivery of digital solutions requires almost a single organization. So unlike, I think, many other organizations, my role encompasses the former IT, as well as having the whole innovation and strategy part at the beginning as well.
So you've seen that transformation of IT being a department, let's say, into digital.
Yeah, we've spoken about this before, Madeleine. I've had a view for quite some time, and I was a CIO for many, many years, almost 20 years, that I think we saw IT as a department, and a department that was there to enable the enterprise, but also to control to a certain extent. Digital for me is something completely different, and our role is really to to stimulate, to sustain, to generate new ways of working, and to propel the enterprise, everybody in the enterprise, to our digital future.
Really interesting. So let's say old IT was a brake, and new digital transformation is a lever for change to accelerate. Really interesting.
Yeah, I wouldn't call old IT a brake.
A brake. But yeah, but it did used to be the case of IT says no, you can't put your USB stick in, you can't bring your personal phone to work, right?
Yeah.
We did have quite a bit of that. So, Janneke, so given this digital transformation, why did you start doing what you do now?
I love technology and I really see the possibilities of it, but I also see very clearly that not everybody is participating in how we design our future, and I do think that's really important. For many reasons, because, well, if you design the future, build the future, everybody should participate for their own development and also financial possibilities, because this is where the growth is and where a lot of value is created, and we should make sure that that's broadly distributed and that everybody has an opportunity. But more important, if we don't make sure that this whole technology space is diverse, we create a world that's not inclusive. And you see that in many places where non-diverse teams build certain things, and not purposely, but that just are not suitable for everybody. And I think, or that discriminate people, that exclude them, that there's many examples, and I think the recent issues with the tax authorities is a good example on how it can really ruin people's lives. And if you look at artificial intelligence, people assume it's neutral because it's algorithms. But these algorithms are created by people, and the input data that's used is very often not neutral at all. So when you don't realize the potential consequences, then you can unpurposely create things that exclude people. So if you look at healthcare, historical data still mainly is about white men, because it's only recent that we discover that women have a different body, people with a different ethnicity have a different body. So if you use that historical data and not realizing this because you've never faced any issues yourself, then you can actually kill people with the outcomes. And that's why the diversity is so important, because then you really have the different viewpoints and people with different experiences that give input for what to create. And the racist soap dispenser, I think, is also a really great example. It's these soap dispensers that you don't need to touch to get the soap. And you see them very often at airports. Well, I think these days you see them everywhere because you're not supposed to touch anything. But what it turned out is that it only works for white people, because the machine needs the reflection of a white hand to actually work. Well, if you have a diverse team, these kind of things just don't happen. So you create much better products. And also the downside with artificial intelligence is often it's a black box. So you don't know why you are refused a mortgage or why you're not included in something. So it's very important that we make sure that this whole tech world that we build is inclusive for everybody.
Absolutely.
Can I make a point about, I just wondered during the pandemic with people working at home and obviously dialed in remotely via tools like Zoom or Teams or whatever, we found it to be much more inclusive way of working than we saw previously, where perhaps you had a group of people in a room and people excluded by having to either dial in or be on the periphery of the meeting. And I think going forward from an inclusion perspective, one of the things that's going to happen more is that if one person's in the call, everybody's in the call. We won't have big meetings where people, a small portion of the people are dialed in, because it is exclusive behavior.
Yeah, I think that's part of inclusion, but I think in general that if you look specifically at gender, and also I think black people, people of color, they are disproportionately hit by COVID. If you look at gender, Then women left the workforce more often, home abuse increased, UNICEF expects a big increase in child marriages, so there's a lot of, unfortunately, also downsides, and I think people of color have been hit by the disease in bigger ways than white people. So there's unfortunately also a way that made the differences even bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we're seeing that society is bifurcating in a way, the haves are getting more and the have-nots are getting even less. Jeroen, at Salesforce, you've built a very famous inclusive culture. Mark Benioff is very famous for having leveled out the pay gap, and 3 years on the trot, he had to cough up like $3 million each year to level up people. Can you share a bit about how you experienced that?
Yeah, from multiple angles. So first of all, of course, I'm very happy that we do that. We do it for many years now, but we're not there yet because every year we still need to pay a few $1 million to fix the differences. By the way, maybe it's good news to some extent, but it's not only always now the women that are underpaid. In some departments, the men can be underpaid. So I think that's the nice thing behind the policy. It's not about men or women, it's about fairness when you start into a position. One way how I experienced it as a people manager is I hired a lady from an analyst firm. She joined my company. I brought her into a specific pay grade. And to be honest, I was not sure which pay grade I would place her because she was kind of an atypical hire, so to say. But I brought her into the, let's say, the higher rate. But then I didn't bring her in on the midpoint. And the reason, and we have a policy that we want when we ask women to join the company to start at the midpoint. So on the day that she joined, she also received a letter automatically from the company that she received a pay increase, because it was not a big one, but she automatically got the message, because we don't want people to start underpaid. So that was also a lesson learned for me as a manager, like you really need to be careful about these things, check your data points, and better get it right. So it was good education from that angle.
Really interesting. So the culture kind of supported you in making, doing the right thing, making the right decision.
But what I think, if I can add to this, is the fact that Mark Benioff is so outspoken about this is really important. And as you say, this is not about men versus women. It is really better for everybody, and that's why it's so important to have male allies that also speak up about this. And it's not just the women saying, "Hey, this should be fixed." So that's, I think.
Yeah, and also I think put your money where your mouth is. So if you say it's important, then you better get it right. And if I might compare to my wife, she's working at the university as she's a professor there. And they also have, they figured out that there is a pay gap, but they're not really taking measures to fix it, or let's put it this way, they do it very slowly. So, but then you lose trust, people lose trust, like, are we really taking it seriously? Are we going to fix it? Or is this just one of the 500 priorities that we have, and it might take another 5 or 10 years before it's fixed? So, I think that's something to be aware of. Yeah.
It's interesting, this morning Page Group brought out a press release saying that only 2/3 of companies in the Netherlands have a policy on diversity and inclusion, and only 2/3 of that have actually done anything other than have a policy.
Yeah.
So really important that if you take the step to get the data, to also make sure that you attach some consequences to that. I'd like to cut to a little video from DSM. They've taken a very interesting step. Diversity is not only male or female, but what is really paramount, of course, is diversity of thought. And DSM took a very unusual step. They have a dual CEO at the moment, and they've taken great pains to have a male and female CEO. So let's see how this panned out for them.
It's so nice to be away from the screens. It's been a while since we've done this, but I have to say, last time it was a lot warmer. Yeah. Now, when we look at 2020, we could never have imagined that we were going to face such a year. When the pandemic started spreading, we had to act really swiftly, and I have to say that we thought long and hard. Are we taking measures too quick? Are we being too strict? But actually, looking back, we can be really proud that we acted as we did and how the organization responded to this incredibly challenging situation.
2020 was an incredible year. specifically on the people front. Amazing year with our safety performance improved in 2020. Our engagement survey went up in 2020. On the planet front, we continue to make progress on our target to net zero carbon emissions, even in 2020, in that unprecedented year. And we had a very solid performance helping our shareholders.
So Peter, looking at this, what opportunities do you see for yourself in this environment?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, I'm very proud of that video for a number of reasons. Firstly, as you said, Madeleine, it's our co-CEOs. You see the gender diversity in our two CEOs, and also in our top team is also a 50-50 split on gender, as well as some other diverse elements. The other thing you may not have picked it up, but Dimitri, the other CEO, spoke about people, planet, profit, which are our 3 Ps, which is our purpose-led agendas. And he spoke of them with equal measure, basically, in that small clip that we see. So what I see here is an organization that is coming to terms with its role in the world as a leader, as a purpose-led leader, contribution to the planet, contribution to society, and of course ultimately to the contribution to the stakeholders and the shareholders. So I'm very, very proud of what we've just seen.
Yeah, awesome.
And I think the diversity of thought ID, DSM is obviously doing it with absolutely the right intentions and goals, but you also sometimes see companies abusing that to justify an all-white male team, saying, oh, but we are very diverse in our thoughts. And that's obviously what you don't do, but you should also be careful that people don't take that as an excuse.
Yeah, many years ago, I was working in a company, and I'd picked up the role as the sponsor for the gender diversity program, and I really didn't know what to do. Here I am, a reasonably old white male, having to worry about, it's a large, significant organization where I was the executive sponsor for gender diversity. And I was given the opportunity to mentor a very high potential woman in the finance organization. And we had our first mentoring meeting, and we really struggled to know what to talk to each other about. I had my agenda that I wanted to share, and I wanted her to tell me what her development goals were so that I could help her. And we kind of struggled for the first meeting, and then for the second meeting. And then at the third meeting, she said, you know, I think you need help. I said, okay, fine. You know, I was a little bit nervous. What kind of help do I need? And she said, I don't think you see this company in the same way that I do. I said, well, you know, we sit on the same floor, we go to the same canteen. And then she spent 45 minutes, and it was probably one of the most memorable 45 minutes of my whole career, and that subsequently convinced me to get much more involved in inclusion and diversity. And she described the company through her eyes, and her perspective, and how she was discriminated against on a daily basis, both thought, comment, emails, and so on and so forth, really convinced me and helped me understand the struggle that she had. She's still a very, very good friend today, and now works at DSM as well, which is quite super. But it was like a real turning point for me.
And it's interesting that when we look at how we live on the same planet but in different worlds, if we look at investment, only 2% of all venture capital investment go to women, and the amount that goes to minorities is so small that in the rounding it's practically zero. So, Janneke, how can we capitalize on these opportunities?
By investing in women and minorities. Yeah, it really is that simple. But the problem with venture capital, well, first let me tell you that venture capital plays quite a big role in how we shape our future. So 8 of the 10 most valuable companies today, one day started with venture capital. So they have a big say in which companies get the opportunity to grow and flourish. And the problem in venture capital is that it's dominantly white and male. and bias is a human thing. So we all have it. It's not just men, it's men, women, everybody is biased in a certain way. And with investments, people tend to invest in what they know, what they like, what they recognize. So they basically invest in themselves. So if that industry is white and male, they invest in white male entrepreneurs. And it has nothing to do with the talent that's out there, because there's so much talent. You just need to be open to it. And one other element in venture capital is networks. So most investors want warm introductions before they consider talking to somebody. And I think that is so stupid, because technology is super data-driven, and still somehow these people tend to, that work in investment, think that all the future unicorns are in their network. So statistically, that's impossible. So, and that's how you keep this like it is. So there's a few things that need to happen. People should really look outside their networks, but they should also diversify on the investment side, because you see that in venture capital funds that are more diverse, they invest in more diverse founders. And it's, again, it's not that they are not there, they just need to have the opportunity to pitch. And we work really hard to make sure that we have very diverse deal flow. So we are everywhere in all the different networks, and we present ourselves as like open to everybody. And that helps, because our deal flow is diverse. And then when you pick the best founders from that very diverse deal flow, you also get a very diverse portfolio. And that's why I'm also very positive about the future, that there will be change, because we see it every day. And we through these starting entrepreneurs, we get a peek in the future, and that future is very exciting and very diverse.
Really.
Can I ask a question, Janneke? Because I'm curious then, what advice would you have for starting entrepreneurs who have a diverse background and maybe have, of course they should talk to you, I understand that, but in general, what would you recommend to those startups?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that you try to find the VCs that match your company, because we don't invest in all different sectors. And then make sure that you have a stellar story, because you need to perform, and that's the reality, and it's unfair, but it is a reality. You need to perform like 10 times better during your first pitch, and try to find VCs where there is a diverse team, and you can also of course try VCs that don't have that, but your chances are just lower. But I still feel you should always try. But you see a change on the VC side, and also VCs realizing that they have to diversify on their end. So they are more and more open to that, but go to the office hours. For example, Sequoia has special office hours for female founders. Go there, because they do make investments. And so make use of the small holes there are, the small opportunities, and try to catch them. And I think Morgan Stanley, they basically said to venture capital, like, there's this 4 trillion opportunity that you leave at the table by not investing in women and minorities. So I think the funds that don't jump into this century, they will be left out. But until then, it's still hard work, and it's still every now and then very frustrating. I wrote a column for Eva Jinek yesterday, also saying that what we often get to hear when we pitch for funding with our fund is, yeah, you really need a man. And nobody specifies what that man has to do, what capabilities that man needs to have. So obviously, just the presence of a man is an upgrade for us, which is rather interesting.
Yeah.
So speaking of these external networks and the external environment, Jeroen and Peter, you both work for leading lights of companies in this area. How do you bring the external world in? How do you, what external networks or organizations do you support? How do you bring that perspective in?
Yeah, just to give an answer, please add to it, Peter. But I think one example that comes to mind is Tech Grounds, which is an initiative in Amsterdam, and they basically give education to underprivileged people from underprivileged areas. So we started the class together with TechGrounds to certify people to become a Salesforce administrator. And one of the, and typically those are people between, let's say, 22 and 30, maybe even up to 35. So they often have a little bit of work experience, but sometimes just bad luck or not the founding to, not the funds to do studies that they like to do. So we help them provide laptops, and then and off they go, I would almost say. So an example is very nice. A guy who was unemployed at that time, had some health issues, went to the mosque, found a brochure about Salesforce, subscribed, and now he passed the exams and found a job. You know, so yeah, I really love those examples. But it's also very important because with gender equality, it's still a steep mountain to climb, but I think with having fair representation, but also the underrepresented minorities in companies like Salesforce, it's still even a bigger mountain to climb. We're even not scratching the surface, I think. So you only can help it to start also at the bottom, build more talent and bring them into your companies. Yeah. Or in this case, into the ecosystem. But also curious to hear your perspective.
Well, obviously,
yeah.
You know, 50% of the customer base is also female,
yeah.
and only a very small percentage is white.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if you
Yeah.
look at where the markets are. Peter, in nutrition, how does this play into this?
Yeah, I was coming at it from a slightly different angle. I mean, we operate in over 50 countries, and our goal is to have a mix of representation in that geography that represents the geography. So that transcends kind of, you know, white, black, or whatever. It's really how that operates. And we do a lot of work in local communities in geography. So that's how we do it. But I'd like to pick up a point which is in terms of attitudes of people. And you spoke about VCs and how they select. And I've come across this concept of blind selection. I think you may, you know, where people are presented without any knowledge of their race, ethnicity, so their ethnicity, their gender. And at the end of the day, I think that one of the only ways we're ultimately going to overcome conscious and unconscious bias is to have some way that people can present themselves without any of the normal attributes being presented, so that they get a fair try. Because I think that's what you were trying to explain with the VCs.
We're going to come on to doing data-driven selection, but first we have Constantine van Orange, a special envoy at TechLeap on the line. Good morning, Constantine. Thank you so much for joining us. You're involved with TechLeap, and I was wondering, can you tell us a bit more about what you do and what your goal is?
Well, at TechLeap, I see there's a certain delay in the line, but I hope this works well. TechLeap is an organization that basically wants to bring the Netherlands to the next level when it comes to tech scale-ups and create an ecosystem where these companies can grow faster and hopefully will produce more long-term sustainable companies in domains that are really relevant for kind of future of our society. And we would try to identify the barriers and remove those, but also help the high-performing entrepreneurs perform even better.
This sounds really interesting. And what have you achieved so far? This sounds like good words, I was going to say, but what has come out of that so far?
Well, basically, we look at the main indicators, and we can't say that we've been the only actor to stimulate those. For instance, the total venture capital spend in the Netherlands has gone up year after year. Yet last year was a record year of 1.8 billion. We're seeing more startups being started, and we're seeing more companies actually growing into kind of unicorn status. So on those indicators, we're doing quite well, and we're just one factor in that play. We're kind of pushing up the ranking. We're now, I think, 12th ecosystem in the world, which is I think a bit of a success, but way not as far as we want to go.
Janneke, you had a comment.
Yeah, so Constantine is saying just one factor, but I think that there he's too modest. I think TechLeap is quite an important ecosystem builder. They are really the glue. and also on the policy level are doing a lot of things. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs in the Netherlands are really happy that they exist.
Brilliant. So they give some air cover. Constantine, how did you end up getting a passion for technology? How did you roll into this?
Well, I used to work at Rand Corporation, where we looked at how technology impacts society and the economy and what policies can have a positive influence. So it was more on from the policy side, and I ended up with Nelly Kroes at the European Commission, developing the digital agenda and executing that. And there we bumped into many startups that became our ambassadors, basically, for digitization, because 10 years ago, digitization was not considered so revolutionary and cross-sector as it is today. And I think technology is going to be the big driver of economic change and new ways, new business models. And if we don't, if we're not a part of that as a country or as an ecosystem, then we'll lose out in the future. So I think it's really important for our competitiveness going forward.
I see a lot of nods around the table. And Constantine, maybe a bit more personal. You've got 2 daughters and a son. So I think that there's also some intrinsic motivation to make the world better. How do you think the world will be different for your children?
So it means every father or parent will have that motivation. It would be good, though. I think that would be great. Everybody would want to make the world better, leave it a better world behind than we've inherited. I would wish for our kids that they live in a world where everybody has equal opportunities, and where it's not only equal but also equitable. That we make sure that also what we're building in this technology ecosystem, that it's much more accessible for everyone. Because as I really believe that this is going to be the future, and that every sector is going to be dominated by some new player that we don't know, maybe European, maybe Chinese, maybe American, but they will come up like Tesla in the car industry, that this disruption is going to happen. And it would be a really bad outcome if this would only benefit like highly educated, white male demography. So I really hope that when they grow up, the world will be more inclusive, will be more supportive of everybody's best talents to emerge, and give opportunities to them.
You've been at this journey, as you said, for about 10 years. What are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? This is a business. It's long term, and I think that's why I'm doing this, because I've been in various industries, and I actually kind of understand government maybe better than most entrepreneurs do, and I understand entrepreneurs better than most the government people do, and it is not a thing of quick wins. If you look back 10 years, a lot has changed, and we've been more adaptive to that change, and we've been able to capture more of the value there as well. And so I don't, I'll be proud when I'm done with this job, and I've seen that that companies or good entrepreneurs have can actually go to market and have the same kind of professionalism that we've seen in places like Tel Aviv or like Silicon Valley, and then I'll be happy. But there's still a lot to be done, and there's a lot to be done in how we fund companies. There's a lot in how we educate people, So I'm still looking forward. I'm not looking back on my successes, and it's more when we have the end game in scope that I can say if this was a good thing or not.
Today you're speaking to many CIOs, and as you said, this is a long journey, and we all need to do this together. What can the CIOs, the founders in the tech community, what can they do to support this?
Well, I think this is a topic. The inclusiveness topic is really important, and it's been a learning process for me as well. At first, I just didn't care. It had to be and more entrepreneurs, more money, faster growth, and more start to understand how relevant it is for the companies themselves to have an inclusive culture. And I see it in my own organization as well. People bring a lot of their skills and a lot of their personality to their jobs, and they have to feel safe about that. And it means that you also have to feel safe about where you're coming from and your background. And it means that the environment you want to work in is not just one homogenous culture. It has to be open for people of very different backgrounds. And I've really come to understand how important this is. And this is not something you can kind of retrofit into an organization. If you have an organization with only one demography, then it's very unlikely that it will be an attractive place to work for other people. And you need that talent. You need a broad base of talent when you're a growing company. So I think your CIO is typically, it's pretty male-oriented group of people. I think we should be broadening that up. And even though many people will say there's a pipeline issue and where do I find the women, I think it's also part of our duty to start investing in education, in growing that pipeline, because it's in all of our interest to have to change this group of people, this sector, to a much more inclusive one. And I think this is really holding back a number of our companies when they, because in the Netherlands is too small. You have to go international, and it means to go international means that you have to be provide a culture and a business that is geared towards also an international group of people. And I see that too many companies are not ready for that. They either in their language, in their culture, in how they express themselves, how they present themselves, are really not inclusive, and that's something that needs to change.
Peter, you've said that DSM is doing business in 50 countries. You yourself are not Dutch. You want to react to Constantine on this?
No, I was thinking a lot as Constantine was talking, and thank you for the insight. But as a young person joining a large company, difference is not something that you automatically think is tolerated. And I think certainly in my own case, which I'll talk about in a minute, joining a large global company just after university, I wanted to be the same as everybody else because I thought that was the way in which I would make it up the tree. It was only halfway through my career that I realized that being the same as everybody else was the thing that was preventing me from making it up the tree. And I think that tolerating difference in an enterprise, irrespective of whatever it is, but having a culture that's diverse through difference and has eradicated exclusion and is therefore inclusive, I think is absolutely fundamental. And I sometimes struggle with this whole inclusion and diversity thing because I think that you can only really be inclusive when you've eradicated exclusion. And exclusion is all around us, and it's everywhere. And we need to be able to call it out. And I find also in enterprises that it's also not politically correct at times to call exclusive behavior out. So I'm rambling a little bit, but difference is important, and difference is what will make companies better.
Yeah, and people, what they don't seem to understand in companies is that if you don't have an inclusive culture internally, then how do you relate to, and this means that you are intrinsically interested in the backgrounds of your colleagues and in what makes people different. Then how does that relate to your customers? How does that relate to your suppliers? How do companies and people in companies communicate to the wider ecosystem? So you hear a lot of companies now talk about how they are ecosystem players. But if you have a culture that is actually exclusive and non-diverse, how do you think that translates to the relationship with the ecosystem players that you want to engage. And I think we should start thinking about this whole issue in a much more strategic kind of boardroom, at a boardroom level, and seeing it for what it's really worth.
Thanks a lot, Constantine.
Yeah, and I also think it's important to realize that diversity and inclusiveness doesn't mean that things are more easy, because all these different viewpoints will lead to better outcomes, but it's in a less easy way. If you all agree, you're done in 5 minutes. But if you have a discussion, then it might take an hour, but the outcome will be significantly better. So people shouldn't confuse diversity and easy with each other. And they should also realize that things are going to be a little bit more complex, but for a good reason. And if you don't think about that, you might mainly see it as a burden.
Yeah, I've had in the last couple of years, I've had the real pleasure of working with some very young people, significantly younger than I am. And the one thing that the things that they bring, energy, perspective, more risk tolerant and so on and so forth, I have found really, really quite inspiring. And to the point that I have some organization changes going on at the moment, and it's possible that I won't have the connection to some of these people that I had in the past. And I'm actually quite sad about it, but even more importantly, I've kind of learnt more about myself as a result of the experience with this group of people in the last couple of years than I probably have with any other group in the last 5 or 10 years. And that was opening up to the generation diversity.
Yeah, that's also a challenge in our Dutch ecosystem, right? We are becoming grayer and older. And how do we keep people at the end of their careers engaged, and how do we connect the famous millennial problem, millennial challenge? So, Constantine, at this moment, there's only 6% of women CIOs. It's the least pink seat in the Netherlands. I also campaign for this. I'm one of few, and I look forward to meeting you again on this journey. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Thanks for your insights.
Bye-bye.
Peter, you discussed a little bit about being different, and you face some big challenges in your career around the theme of your partner and your life choices. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to it. So I think I worked out I've been working for 40 years, so you can work out that I've just turned 60. And in the early stages of my career, as I said, as a reasonably bright and ambitious person, I thought that the only way to make it up was to be like everybody else, and therefore for the first 20 years, denied my sexuality. I'm a gay man, and I got to a point where looking up, I believed that if I was open about my sexuality, it certainly wouldn't get me to where I wanted to be. And a significant promotion came. My first CIO position came, and I was being mentored, and I had a conversation with a very enlightened woman, the woman that was mentoring me, and we had a whole conversation about bringing your whole self to work. And we never really spoke about sexuality. We just spoke about you can't be something at home that is different to what you are at work. And over a period of about 3 or 4 months, I kind of resonated and resonated and resonated. And I remember the day I went in and decided this is now the day. It happened, and just amazing since then. Just amazing since then. Of course, it was 20 years ago, so the world has changed again since then. But yeah, it was really, really challenging. And then more recently, I was working in a company here in the Netherlands, and I was posted to Singapore. Now, what you might know is that Singapore is not tolerant of gay marriage, for example, and I am married. So it was difficult for my husband, and he didn't, in the end, come and live in Singapore as a result. And at that stage, again, career, kind of family life, home position was very, very difficult. So to a certain extent, and I wouldn't say I felt like other people have been excluded, I have felt a sense of exclusion and difference as my career has progressed. In later life, and people that know me quite well will know this to be absolutely the case, I love being different. So it's something that I now celebrate myself, but it's taken a long journey to get here.
And you are a role model for so many other people, a role model that you didn't have when you were young.
Absolutely.
And just you being at this table today creates safe space for other people to be themselves.
Yeah, and Madeline, we've known each other for quite some time, but this concept of bringing your whole self to work is something that is very, very, very much a priority for me. And I mentor quite a lot of people, and not necessarily about sexuality, often many other things. You look at someone and you say, just come over the line. Just there is something there, and if you could bring it out, then the world is your oyster. Mm.
Being yourself. Yeah.
What did it do to you, Peter? How did it change let's say, the daily job when you brought your real self to life?
I'm known for having quite a wicked sense of humour. Yeah. I have quite high energy. Yeah. I'm sure it would have been called ADD when I was a child, but it probably hadn't been invented then. So I go with my personality. I don't fight it. So I'm a very, very different person than the person I was before. Yeah. Cool.
And it's interesting, we see a huge increase at the moment in burnout in young people. Yeah. And I think that a big contributor to that is that they have this perfect expectation of this perfect person that they need to be, this Instagram person at work, at life, and keep up this facade. And the moment that disconnects from your true self, you're in stress. Yeah. And you can't keep that up all that long before you go into a meltdown or a very stressed situation with long-term health consequences. So this is extremely important. And if we don't all bring our whole full selves, we don't create safe space for other people to bring their whole true selves. I think this is the crux of inclusion and being a good role model. And but of course, being different is not only male or female or culture or race or religion or sexuality. We also have this moment of generational shift at the moment. So for the first time in hundreds of years in Europe, we have more older people than younger people, and we seem to struggle to connect. So I'm wondering, to what extent does the human factor affect your business?
I was thinking, like, I think the structures of the company can also impact how inclusive you are. And just to give an example that just came to mind during this conversation, but we have a solution engineering organization, and typically we always look for the most experienced, because we believe that the people who have the most experience, they will be best capable to explain to our customers how they should drive business innovation or use the software. But that works out if you then look at, for example, in the solution engineering department, that's typically on 80% is male, So if we would do, let's say, a normal, reasonable job, we would end up with 80% male, having 20 years plus experience. So now the new solution engineering manager is fighting that he said, I want to spend my budget for hiring not just based on headcount, I just want to have dollars. And then I can decide, is this a position where I need somebody who's very experienced? Of course, still can be female, can be male, but somebody very experienced. Or do I go for example, for 2 new hires for the same budget who just come out of college? But I know that because he's fighting this fight, his balance in his team will differentiate. There will be more balance from an age perspective. There will be more balance from a gender perspective, because the talent pool is much bigger if you hire younger people, as an example. At the same time, of course, we also need to be careful that we stay inclusive for people who are closer to, let's say, the pension date. I think if from that angle you can create structures, but also train people for the unconscious bias that they might have. So we get at Salesforce, we get training in what they call microaggression. How can you prevent microaggression? And everybody has it. I think I'm very aware, but even myself, I notice sometimes that you have those microaggressions that you're not aware of. So still a way to go. Yeah.
Yeah, it starts with looking in the mirror for all of us, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Janneke, but speaking of looking in the mirror, how do you look at a company's workforce when you make decisions on investments?
So we make an analysis of the team based on a science-based model that Eva, my business partner, developed during her PhD. And because when we invest really early. So you have basically a team and a vision. And not a lot of numbers, an amazing hockey stick, but those are the most important proof points. And you want to know whether this team can execute on the vision. And in a data-driven world, still many of the decisions around team are based on gut feel, bias, stereotypes, pattern matching, and we like to overlay our gut feel with actual facts. So we look at different things like personality traits, passion for entrepreneurship, the more hard skills, so the concrete experience, but also the team dynamics. Because you can put the smartest people in the room. If you don't have a shared vision, or there's not the right psychological safety in the team, or not the right team cohesion, people won't share that knowledge. So it's basically useless. And one of the things we also look at is there enough conflict? And not like personal conflict, but what we talked about earlier. Do people have like really good discussions? So if it's all one big happy family, we don't see that as a super positive sign. And because that is an indication that there's not enough diversity in skills and knowledge. So there's many things we look at, and also when you invest early, there's never a perfect team, and it doesn't have to be. But it's good to know whether there's big gaps or small gaps, things you can fix. And it's also something that people find difficult to talk about. So having an objective analysis makes that conversation much more easy. And it's so important to have that conversation early and continue to do it. Instead of like just having a bomb explode because you find out you're totally not aligned. And that can really ruin companies. Startups fail very often in 90% of the cases, and in 60% of the cases that's due to issues with the team. So that's such an important element of success that, yeah, for us that's a really key driver for our decision making, whether we invest or not.
But is your approach not kind of social engineering to a perfect standard?
No, because we don't expect anything to be perfect, but it's looking at what there is today, and certain, like if you look at personality traits, and there are certain indicators for successful entrepreneurs. So stress resistance, perseverance, resilience, those are really important things for an entrepreneur to have. Mm-hmm. And also passion for entrepreneurship, because that drives a lot of the other things. Mm-hmm. So we don't try to be perfect, because there is no right or wrong, and one team that's totally different than another can both be successful. But if you don't have the right team cohesion, I mean, it's just not going to work.
Let's take a look at one of your investments, where this company deals with this skill assessment and biases. Testgorilla.
So, you're hiring. Finding the right person for the job can be difficult and costly. But what if I told you there's a faster, easier, and bias-free way to hire? That starting today, you can leave the time-wasting and expensive mishires behind, and instead, focus on the best and brightest candidates from the start. Sound good? Great! Then it's time to reinvent your hiring with Testgorilla. We offer you seriously smart screening tests crafted by experts. Here's why our model is so effective. Research shows that combining different skill tests into one assessment is the best way to predict job success for candidates. We save you time by automatically recommending you the most relevant tests based on the job you're hiring for. This makes it incredibly easy for you to build an assessment and then personalize it with your own unique questions, company logo, and color theme. In just a few clicks, you can send the assessment to your candidates and watch the results roll in. You'll be able to spot your top candidates at a glance, ranked by real data and not just a gut feeling. But that's not all. From there, you can get to know your candidates on a deeper level with features like video responses, personality tests, and more. Ready to get started? Sign up for your free trial today and experience what it's like to hire the best. Faster, easier, and bias-free.
Jeroen, you started your life in HR.
Yes.
Many, many moons ago with skills and competence assessments. What do you make of this?
Yeah, well, I love it. So yeah, absolutely close to the heart. So I studied human resource management indeed here in Tilburg, and that was like more than 20 years ago. But at that time, we already had research that proved that if you just have an unstructured interview with the candidate, that it has zero impact on predicting job success. So I strongly believe in these kind of tests, not just as a sole mechanism to make your decision, but really to fund it with data and also to look at what can you see, let's say, what's visible with people, but also what's underneath the surface. What are the drivers? What's their motivation? So that they also look at personality tests, for example. Yeah, I think that's very smart way to do. Yeah.
So if we're going to change this tide, we need some tools to help.
Maybe good to add here, because we obviously use them as well when we hired somebody, and we thought, okay, what is important for people that work at an investor? For us, it's the most crucial thing is to get a lot of deal flow. So we wanted somebody that's like really creative. But also you need to analyze these startups, so critical thinking is important. Yeah. So we defined a few things that were important. And then we hired 2 people, one that had the perfect resume and one that scored best on the skills. And the perfect resume person, we had to let go within 2 months. And the other person is really exceeding every expectation we have. So yeah, it worked out really well for us.
And I think this raises another topic. So what is the ideal leadership that is needed in IT, in digital life, in technology, to bring this agenda to life? What do you think is needed?
I think at top level it's very important that you give people the... let's say if you hire outside the box and you have not done all the perfect due diligence, or you don't have all the test tooling that you might need to have, there's always some risk. So I think it's very important that people higher up in the chain are giving you time to take a little bit of risk. Because many of the people, let's say outside the box, will be successful, but some will fail. And you have to take it. But that's not different than it would be in a normal situation. But if your first hire that's, let's say, outside the box, if that person struggles and they immediately come complaining like, why have you hired somebody who clearly does not have the perfect resume, you could have seen it, then that's super demotivating. So it's very important that at board level people really drive the culture. Yeah.
Top level sponsorship.
Yeah.
Peter, if you could give one piece of advice to all the CIOs in the Netherlands watching today, what would you say to them?
Well, my advice isn't really to all the CIOs, it's to all the aspirant CIOs, and I've given my advice already, and that would be, just consider if you really are bringing your whole self to work, and if you're not, try it, see what it's like, and you'll see that the world will just become a much better place for you. So that would be my advice.
Daring to be different.
Dare to be different.
Perfect. Janneke, what would be your advice?
Well, my advice would be that you really have to start embracing diversity and inclusion. If you don't already, it is better for your business. And I can guarantee you, if you don't, your company won't exist anymore in a few years' time, because people no longer will accept it, and your company will just underperform. So jump on the train. It's not too late yet.
How about you, Jeroen?
Yeah, probably like we mentioned before, look in the mirror, really look in the mirror as a manager. Are you really doing everything you can to change the culture, and are you stretching the limits or not? So, and if you're not doing it, then just do it, change it, and indeed bring your whole self to work. I like that one, Peter. Yeah.
And what is the one step that we can all take tomorrow? What will you do different, or what will you keep doing?
Well, I think you have to commit to it. That's the first step. And then just take action. Don't talk about it too much. Set the right example. And when it comes to, in this case, young girls, there's also always one advice I would like to give people. We tend to tell girls that they are pretty and boys that they are smart. And it's absolutely fine to tell a girl that she's pretty, only if that's not the only thing you tell them, because it really starts to get in their head, and that's why already at a young age they think that they are not capable of certain things. So tell them that they are super smart and that they can achieve everything and are pretty.
Peter?
Yeah, I would go, I often think this way, we are all unique. Everybody is unique, therefore we are all diverse. So mine is to see the diversity in everybody, because it isn't only, or ever only, about their gender, the color of their skin, their sexuality, their ability. It's often something completely different and quite wonderful.
Being curious about other people and
Yes.
using your emotional intelligence.
Yes, yeah.
And I'd like to thank my guests today. Thank you so much, Jeroen Heijmans, Salesforce, Peter Dew, DSM, Janneke Niessen, Capital T, and of course, Constantine. CIO TV is back next week on Friday, the 19th of March with Hotse Zijlstra. And I would also like to share with you that on the 15th of March, from 3 to 5 p.m. we have the CIO Day post-conference, so do sign up if you haven't done that already. On the 16th of March from 4 to 5:30 there's an online session with Rudy Peters, the CIO of KBC Bank. See you next week.
You surprised us. You challenged us. You inspired us.
We had an idea. It was such a simple solution, but such a big one to start helping people.
You reminded us that business can be the greatest platform for change.
With the pandemic hitting, it bred a lot of uncertainty.
Keeping staff and students safe. Like, what does safety look like?
We recognized that to get through this crisis, we had to rapidly evolve our digital capability.
But most important, you kept it moving forward. Thank you.
We didn't skip a beat. We can run our business from anywhere.
We need to embrace the future and move forward and bring our organizations along.
We moved fast, determined.
You forward more than 50 million pieces of protective equipment. How did you do that?
Together, we came up with big, bold ideas.
Salesforce made it very easy for us to pivot during a very difficult time.
Salesforce launched Work.com.
The software aimed at helping companies safely reopen their offices.
We kept it moving forward.
Trust is the cornerstone of our relationship with our customers.
Without customers trusting us, we wouldn't have a business.
We were able to produce a very robust multi-campus contact tracing solution in 3 days.
And it was the information that they needed to move forward.
So after all that 2020 sent our way, do we go back to the past? Or do we start something new?
Welcome to Dreamforce 2020. It's a Dreamforce we'll never forget.
Salesforce buying Slack is among the biggest deals ever in the software industry.
We believe we can accomplish in the next 5 years what might have taken us 20 years to do otherwise.
We see an all-digital, work-from-anywhere world. One that's no longer limited by outdated ways of thinking and working.
With Customer 360, we can create a single source of truth that allows us to create extraordinary experiences for our customers.
We're a better company now than we were a year ago.
More connected, more productive, more fluid.
It's the thing that we all can see. We have a window into the same picture.
Less complicated, more trusted, more sustainable.
For the first time, we're actually going to bring sustainability to the customer engagement.
We want to be positioned for the future.
There's no going back. This is the new status quo.
And together, we'll keep it moving forward. It's going to be a whole new Salesforce, where the future works.